I am truly delighted, and I'm looking around to see where she is. You can stay there, that's fine. I'm truly delighted to introduce Professor Lucy Chappell, newly appointed Chief Scientific Advisor for the Department of Health and Social Care, and our brand spanking new Chief Executive of the National Institute for Health Research. For people who don't know Lucy, she is also a professor of obstetrics at King's College London, honorary consultant obstetrician at Guy's and St Thomas NHS Foundation Trust, and an NIHR senior investigator. She probably never sleeps. Please join me in welcoming Professor Lucy Chappell to the stage.
And let it burn. You got off on the hurting when it wasn't yours. Yeah.
I'm delighted to be here today and to be talking to all of you. And this is going to be just a few thoughts from me and then some Q&A with Divya, because I'd really like to hear what is on your mind. And probably in quite an honest conversation. And so I'm happy because I'm in listening mode as well. And although a lot of people have asked me, what are you going to do? I'm going to also indicate that I'm here to listen to you as well as give you a flavour of my vision. So, let's see what I've got. Lovely. Divya's done a very kind invitation. And in fact, I'll tell you that I'm heading off after lunch to go back to antenatal clinic because I've chosen to take this job at an 80%, so that I retain a 20% role as a researcher and a clinician, because for me it's important to be credible. So if I tell you that I'm in the middle of opening a multi-centre study, and that happily lots of people around the country don't know who I am, so I'm opening sites at the moment and going through exactly the same as many of you are. I want to start by talking about why I've taken this role. And I think it's quite simple. I want to make a difference. And I've wanted to make a difference for years to the care and outcomes of pregnant women, and my focus is particularly on pregnant women with hypertension. And that's driven me for a long time. I have a passion for it. It's a team event, and I feel strongly. And this is work that our group did that was with industry from the very first steps, and has been a red thread woven through my career. And to see this as a case study on the NIHR website, I'm really proud of that. But it represents work from so many people, including pregnant women who participated. So I'm living proof that pregnant women do take part in research, and that partnership between researchers, funders, and most importantly, the participants, is what makes this. So this is the culmination, my Lancet paper in 2019, and behind that single paper was 2 decades of work, and that taught me a lot about working with industry. In pregnancy research, you don't hang out with industry that much, but this was a diagnostics company, and it taught me to see things from their perspective. I put myself in their shoes. They wanted to go at a speed that I hadn't seen before, and it was great. I just suddenly thought, well, what are these blockers? So it ended up with the trial. This is the parrot trial. I named my studies after birds and animals, so there's going to be lots more parrots and pelicans. And then one of the reasons I took this role, because I had a so what next moment. So that, we're supposed to like our Lancet papers, I do, but actually I was really bothered about getting it into guidelines, which it did, looking at the cost effectiveness, because we're not going to have a sustainable NHS if we just keep on doing more and more with the fixed budget or the currently increasing budget that we have. But actually the media coverage was really helpful in terms of getting the message out more widely to women. And one thing that's been transformative was working with the AAC and now the MedTech to actually see this rolled into the NHS. So I now go to hospitals and I see this test that was just an embryonic idea some years ago actually being delivered into service. And that's what I think we are here for. But that journey was part of why I've come to this role. I've taken this through the pandemic as well. So we've carried on with a study running in the background through the pandemic, but I faced all of the challenges of the research stopping and starting, stopping in many sites, and know what that feels like. And we thought about how do we show that this research is relevant and continues to be relevant in today's environment. My other strong, what's threw me like a stick of rock, is about the idea of research for all and not for a few. So this is from a year or two ago about the toolkit for increasing participation. And I feel really strongly about this. And I think NIHR has been a leader, not a follower on this. And it's going to be something that you will see during my time. And not only across the UK, this is the hospital where I work at St Thomas's, but we are also working in Ndola, in Zambia, and we want to see how does what the UK, the work that the UK does translate globally, because that's where we should be. So this obstetric high dependency unit in Ndola, when I saw that, this is one of my photos, it just reminded me that we've also got a role to play in that global message and in partnership with our Ndola partners. I don't do things to them, but we work as partners. It's also brought me to another way of thinking, which is away from this linear sequential model of translation. So you're all familiar with this pipeline, probably takes 17 to 20 years, and the valleys of death that exist. Well, I want to say that I see things differently. So I see things as a virtuous circle. And I want us to think about how this works with all of you as partners. This is just my placental growth factor story, because it started with discovery science. It went through cohort studies, it went into clinical trials, and it's now in implementation. But all along the way, I've been thinking, well, how do we go back to the discovery science? How do we find better biomarkers to add in as a diagnostic test so that we're not standing still and we don't fall off the right-hand end of that pipeline? It's much more iterative. And I think this should apply to all of us in this partnership with industry to say, how do we keep on improving? So, for example, the challenge of multiple long-term conditions. If we do our discovery science and our early phase work in a very clean population, we shouldn't be surprised when at implementation stage into real patients, it doesn't look quite as good. So how do we weave in those patients with multiple long-term conditions at an early stage so that our implementation into the real world works? And then how do we say, what do we learn from the patients who don't respond to the treatment? Or what do we learn when the diagnostic test isn't perfect? How do we then weave that back in to the next phase of discovery science? So I'd be interested to hear whether this much more circular model than a linear sequential model works for all of you. So why am I CSA? So I think research is just pivotal. For me, there's just a world where we can either be facilitating research, we can be active, we can be leading. But I really struggle with people who block research. There isn't a place for it. Why would we want a health and social care system where there isn't research that is just constantly driving our care forward? We knew when we entered COVID that we didn't have the answers. So it was obvious to everyone that we needed the research to make the treatment and the vaccines happen. So why aren't we doing that for all the other conditions? So I'm on a mission to work with the health and social care trusts to put this idea that at the very least, the health and social care professionals can be facilitative. That's the minimum. But we need research activity of the sort that all of us in this room want. And then we need the research leaders. And that from that perspective, we will move forward. And actually, I'm ambitious and I want to make that happen in social care as well. I was in Manchester yesterday hearing about the fabulous and really diverse research portfolio that they have, and hearing from those who work outside NHS settings. So this isn't about secondary care in the Golden Triangle. This is about a much wider, England-wide, UK-wide, working with the DAs to say, how can we make this happen for the UK, and then have our global reach. The tackling health inequalities is part of that. It comes back to getting out of an ivory tower and saying, we saw from the recovery trial, we put research into every unit, and they've got a taste for it, and they're good at it. So this is not about just the chosen few. I'm interested in a vision that looks at research for everyone and recognizing that working with all centres, and as William mentioned, it's the community. We deliver health and social care in a different way. So how do we flex and adjust to that? And that the inclusion of the patients and participants and the public, I don't have patients, I just have pregnant women. So for me, it is inclusive. Well, for me, that's just obvious, because if they're involved, not as an afterthought, but as a forethought in the prioritization, in the design, all the way through delivery and into dissemination, then we'll get the research that matters. So I think that's just my bread and butter, and the NIHR has really led the field in that and will continue to do so. Our mission is simple. It's about health and wealth. And sometimes not in this room, but sometimes the wealth bit feels like a bit of a dirty word. It isn't. It's what we are here for, because they go hand in hand. And that's a really simple mission statement that is not changing. But the work with industry is a core work stream and a core strategic focus. Because for me, I'm not looking for a them and us to this. I'm looking for us working as a team and ensuring that that message comes across. We do that through transparency, through collaboration, and through translating my words into the actions of everyone. We know the facts and figures. These speak for themselves. We've got such a strong science and research base, and we really saw that not just land with the people in this room, but land at the centre of government through the COVID research. We know that many others were envious. William and I both get emails from around the world saying, can we have one of yours, please? Meaning a CRN, and meaning the research infrastructure that goes along. We both know it's not perfect, but we're in a much, much better research ecosystem place than many other countries. There is work to do. I am not complacent. I know where some of the challenges and the gremlins are. So pre-pandemic, we were doing well. We've got work to catch up, and particularly in terms of pivoting back to non-COVID research. I come in as Chief Scientific Advisor, and I'm one of around 20 Chief Scientific Advisors in government. There's one for pretty much every department. And I've got, I think, the biggest research budget of everyone, so which is a nice challenge to have. So we need to make sure that we're clear about how we spend that budget for the benefit of the health and social care system. And what it's done is that it's put science, research, and evidence at the heart of what the Department of Health and Social Care does. And I bang the drum on a very, very regular basis within the department for that. And we know that what the CRN does is generate additional value and additional jobs, just like all of you here today know, and that we have that additional income generated from commercial sources that also works for the health and social care system. But it's as important to look at what goes in as what goes out. These are some of the case studies on our NIHR website, and I could pick any of them and see where industry is woven through. Because this isn't something we do in isolation. This is a partnership with industry in many ways, and sometimes it looks a bit different. Sometimes it's app development or digital progress. But there's industry involvement in many strands, not just the pharma side, but in many other ways as well. So William talked about the patient engagement. That is one of our sort of flagship areas, and how we can provide that input, as I say, at a really early stage, so that we get it right together. How are we doing? So the financial year, for the last financial year, we've seen this extraordinary COVID response, and I think a stepping up both from all of us in the business, but also from patients and public. And I would really argue strongly that research awareness has taken a big leap. And now I want that momentum to stick. I want the patients turning up to health systems and saying, how can I be part of research? We know that it drives improvement. I want to take part. And I really want to see how we can capitalize on that and not lose that momentum. The new studies and the recruitment is good, but I'm really aware that we just also need to think about how do we return to, I'm hesitating before I say business as usual, because I want it to be business that has moved on, but more like our usual business. I know that there's been a pause on some or much of the non-COVID research, particularly through the second wave. I know that our research workforce is stretched. Interestingly, in Manchester, they were really proud yesterday of their core surge workforce. They had a combination of nurses, research practitioners, and trial administrators who they could flex into the system as they needed. And they saw that as one of the real positives of COVID, that their research workforce might start to look a bit differently. We flexed our workforce into COVID. We looked at ways of working in my trust. And that the recruitment to non-COVID studies is not yet recovered. I still struggle to open at some of my sites who are just saying, too busy, can't take it on at the moment, haven't got the bandwidth. So I know that. But what are the positives? We saw rapid recruitment to studies across the NHS. We saw different ways of working, the vaccine hubs, for example. We switched to different ways of follow-up, all that come up to the hospital for follow-up. Is that necessary? What can we do remotely? How can we digitalise this usefully? And the central pharmacy services, I love our clinical trials pharmacy, but if it's an added blocker that doesn't need to exist, let's use them where they're needed. The digitalisation that I hope will continue, and also where we are seeing work with the regulators that has been positive. I think the HRA and the MHRA have done a fantastic job. You know, they've just changed to online ethics meetings, and I hope to see much of that continue, and I really think the leadership at HRA and MHRA has made that very clear. So many of you will be familiar with the RRG, the Recovery, Resilience and Growth mission that we're on. 5 themes should be very familiar to you as to what is necessary right now. And really, I come back to my pointers that these are good words, we also want to see the action. This is the RRG programme timeline. There is a huge team, multi-sector, working on this. And this is going to be something that both the ministers are very keen to take ownership of, as many of you know, but also all of us across the delivery workforce. And the partnership that we've got for RRG is so crucial. My job is to make sure it is all joined up and connected and to look for where there's any temporary blocks in the system and do what I can to work on those areas. The very recent ABPI report made these recommendations, and it is heartening to see that I think we're very much on the same page. These are challenges that both groups recognised and acknowledged, but actually that means I hope that we work together with ABPI and other industry bodies to really move forward on these. This is our core business, and we both need to go back to our core business to run the sort of nurture the research ecosystem that I think we should be proud of, but also be honest about where things are still difficult and do a combination of the two. And for example, the new ways of working through be part of research and the opportunities that this gives is really where we should be continuing to capitalise on what we've done in the last year and a half. So the implementation plan was published in June following the initial roadmap in March, and these are all areas where we are currently focusing and need to also weave these strands together, make it happen at the granular level at sites, so that these aren't just words on a government page, but they actually filter down to individuals, and that we take all of our workforce with us on this. So we go back to the core operating principles of the organisation that I now lead: impact, excellence, inclusion, collaboration, and effectiveness. And I reflect that those are the very reasons why I went into research in the first place, why I will go back to antenatal clinic this afternoon, where research is completely embedded and where I will continue to offer research to our pregnant women so that I continue to make a difference to their care and to the outcomes of them and their babies on an ongoing basis, both in that room as I sit with a woman, but also in my new role as CSA and Chief Exec of NIHR. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lucy. Your talk just resonated at so many levels, especially when you mentioned the mission of NIHR, improve the health and wealth of the nation. And I spent 14 years of my career in NIHR really focusing on the wealth bit, which is partnering with industry to bring more commercial research into the UK. And actually, I think we've leaped tremendously in research over the last 18 years. More importantly, I took part in a booster study yesterday, my first ever interventional study I took part in. And after I went in, I took photographs, and of course I'm social media, so I went to Instagram to put my photograph up of me having my booster vaccine. And it was great. There was on Instagram, one of the things that says, vaccine research saves lives. I thought that was amazing that actually on social media, on Instagram, I was able to pop that little message on and share it with colleagues. So thank you so much for that. Now we've got some time for some questions, and hopefully you've all got your app up and you can ask questions on there if you have. And even if you don't want to ask questions, you can vote on other people's questions if you really want Lucy to answer those questions. Thank you. Do you want to swap with me, Lucy? Maybe that's better. Thank you. But some people have sent a couple of questions through in advance. And I'll start with the one that, Lucy, I think you slightly addressed, which is HM government has for several years now had some ambitious and clearly stated policy for advancement of life sciences. So how do we as a nation ensure a sense of urgency for implementation against the backdrop of particular pressures of peri-COVID and post-Brexit environment?
It's a very good question. One of the aspects of my job that I was less aware of was launching I started in August into the heat and light of a spending review. And for those who have had any interaction with this, it is extraordinary. We put bids together, and part of that is joined up working with BAYS, who co-host Office for Life Sciences, and the many ways in which we talk about our shared visions. So on the one hand, things are good for science at the moment. There is an ambition to be a science superpower and to spend 22 billion on this. On the other hand, there are huge challenges with budgets at the moment, and a settlement for the NHS and social care for recovery that means that other areas may be squeezed. So I am spending my weeks at the moment dipping in and out of multiple meetings with Treasury officials. But what I really see is the joined-upness of the government departments, where we are not trying to do each other down. There is a cohesion, partly through the Chief Scientist Network and through Go Science, which is the government department that is fighting so strongly for this. There is no sense in me upbidding at the expense of BAYS and Office for Life Sciences. There is no point in it, because I need that partnership to make this happen. So we are on the same page. We now need to get a very clear commitment across to industry, to the Treasury, and this is where industry partners can beat the drum as well. And I know that some of you have written to the Treasury to say, this is important, this is where we should be investing, and this is where we show off the UK as a science superpower. They did allocate 64 million to some of the recovery programme. We are bidding ambitiously in the spending review to do a range of what you saw in the implementation plan, from work with the regulators, going digital, ensuring that research reaches all. So I will do my best, and then we will say, we have this money, how do we spend it wisely, and how do we keep on delivering for impact?
Thank you, Lucy. When you presented, you mentioned 3 layers within the NHS Trust: research, facilitative. You said you must be at least facilitative. But one of the questions that people have sent through in advance is, how do we how can we ensure that our trusts are adequately resourced to actually deliver on this vision for commercial research?
So that's an interesting question, because is it about resource? Is it about willingness? So is it about carrots or sticks? Now, I think everyone in this room kind of gets it. Of course, it's like it's a no-brainer. Of course, we should all be doing research to improve care and outcomes. So what are the barriers that I hear? There is sometimes, I would say, and this is as much from my sort of coalface work, we are in firefighting mode. And it just takes a moment to step back and say, we've got to move from firefighting to fire prevention. And for me, research is that fire prevention. Now, as an obstetrician, if you work, labour ward is always shouting loudest, and we always put resources to labour ward. But actually, if we thought about how to structure our antenatal care or our postnatal care when women move off labour ward, we might reduce the acuity of labour ward. But I can honestly say, and if there's any sort of heads of midwifery or obstetricians in this room, they will realise what I'm talking about, that the firefighting is there. My concept is that I'm not trying to poach their staff, that what we do will improve, research will improve their clinical outcomes, and we know that it helps with recruitment and retention. So and interestingly, the ministers are keen to get this message across as well. I'm not the problem. I'm not trying to make more work for the trusts. I'm trying to help them. And maybe some of that also needs to say, not just doing more and more. Research is another chore. It isn't. Research can be part of the clinical system as well, and can also look at what we do less of, so that we look like that solution for them, both in terms of workload and workforce.
Absolutely. And I'm going to ask you one last question, which I think is quite an interesting question that's come in, is what is the biggest challenge in your role day to day, and how do you tackle it? I'm
in my first 100 days.
Oh.
And I think some of you may have done this zigzag in their career. That is an enormous step. So right now, I'm both operating and in my work sense, not in my surgical sense. I'm both trying to operate in a complex landscape, and I'm also trying to listen and learn. And I think there's space for both. One of the things is that I face many ways. So I face intergovernment, and I'm navigating a Whitehall civil service political environment. I'm working closely with the NIHR, and I've had a career within the NIHR in a number of ways as a research professor and within things like the Health Technology Assessment Programme. But I'm still finding some nooks and crannies of the NIHR, and I'm enjoying that bit. And then as a researcher and clinician. So that juggling act, that plate spinning, is challenging. But I am using this as an opportunity, not just to blast ahead, but to stop and hear from people on the way. And so I'll be here for lunch, and I'm very happy for people to come and tell me what they see. When I go on visits, I make it clear that I don't just want the shiny stuff. I need to hear about the challenges, because otherwise, where am I? That's where I'm going to add value, where I can understand what it's like for you in your bit of the system, and see how we have that joined up vision. But I really come back to being very stimulated, excited, but knowing the challenge that we've got, and really looking forward to leading the NIHR over the next few years.
Well, thank you so much, Lucy. Thank you for coming today and sharing your vision with us.
Thank you.